The fall of Helios Prime, the stars above Helios Prime no longer shimmered with peace. They burned red and angry as fleets of broken ships floated like corpses through the void. Once the shining jewel of the Galactic Union, Helios Prime had become the front line in a war the Union was clearly losing. On its surface, smoke rose in thick black columns. Entire cities once filled with alien harmony were now lifeless ruins. The sky crackled with strange storms born from the chaos of war, and in orbit Union ships were scattered in defensive formation. Barely holding off the endless waves of the enemy had no name spoken aloud anymore. They were called the Swarm by those who still fought them. No one knew what they really were. Some said they were a hive of pure hunger. Others believed they were the leftover rage of a dead star given flesh. It didn't matter what they were. All that mattered was that they did not stop. They did not feel fear. They did not understand mercy. And they had already consumed 12 member planets in less than a year, inside the burning Capital Command bunker on Helios Prime. The remaining leaders of the Galactic Union gathered for what they knew might be their final meeting. There were representatives from the Falari, with their translucent skin glowing dimly in the emergency lights. The Brath warriors stood in silence, muscles twitching from recent battle wounds. The Elan hovered in their containment spheres, ancient and wise, but visibly rattled. For the first time in recorded history, none of them spoke first. It was Chancellor Varix of the Kolari who broke the silence with a simple sentence, "It is time to consider them." Everyone in the room froze. For a moment, no one dared respond, because they knew what he meant, and it was an idea no one wanted to revisit. "You mean the humans?" asked General Trath of the Brath, not hiding his disgust. "They were exiled. They broke every agreement, every law. They burned a planet into glass to win a war, and laughed while doing it." Byrix nodded slowly and replied yes, and they also won every war they ever entered, even when outnumbered and outgunned. "The Varkari swarm has breached our outer lines. We have no reinforcements left. Our fleets are shattered. We need something unpredictable, something brutal, something the swarm cannot anticipate." The Elan emissary floated forward, pulsing with unease. "The humans were cast out for good reason. They are not like us. They create to destroy. They evolve to dominate. They cannot be controlled, but maybe," continued Vurex. "That is what we need. We tried diplomacy tactics, unity. The swarm laughs at our laws. They bypass our shields, melt through our armor, and adapt to our weapons within ours. But the humans? They think in chaos. They make war a game of imagination and nightmares." Low rumble shook the bunker as another orbital strike landed close. The room dimmed as energy rerouted to emergency shielding. Someone somewhere screamed. Orders were shouted in 5 different languages. But inside this room, the silence returned thicker than before. General Trath looked around, then slammed his armored fist onto the table. "Damn it all, if we die here, the Union dies with us. Call them. But remember this. If they come, and if they win, they won't leave easily. They never." Varix looked down at the old communication stone embedded in the floor of the war table, a relic from the days when humanity still sat among the Union Council, unused for decades. Cracked with age but not broken. With slow, deliberate motion, he reached forward, touched it, and activated the protocol long forbidden. Low hum filled the air. Coordinates were locked, signals sent across dimensions toward the Sol system, toward Earth 4. A moment nothing happened, then the stone glowed red. A voice answered. It was not robotic, not alien, not cold. It was human, and calm. Message received, it said. "Die." "Who's dying now?" The Union leaders stood frozen. The humans had answered. The call was made. The die was the human question. The message had been sent, and now there was no turning back. The leaders of the Galactic Union stood in silence, staring at the glowing communication stone, as if expecting it to bite them. The voice that had responded still echoed in their minds, not because it was loud, but because it was so casual, so calm, so human. There was no desperation, no fear, no protocol. It was as if the humans were expecting the call, as if they had been waiting for the galaxy to cry out, "Chancellor." Varix stepped back from the stone, and the light faded to a dull hum. "They have answered," he said in a voice that tried to hide the tremble. "We wait now for their arrival." "Wait for what?" asked General Trath. "Bitterly, a fleet, a planet killer, a team of assassins with nuclear hearts. No one knows what they will send, or if we can even survive what they bring with them across. The room the Elin emissary floated slightly lower than usual. Its glow dimmed. The humans are chaos incarnate. It is their gift and their curse. We must be careful, or we will invite a second war while ending the first outside. The bunker Helios Prime continued to burn. The swarm's attacks grew stronger by the hour, and soon the outer defenses would fall communication. Hubs had gone silent one by one. Union ships vanished from orbital maps. But deep in the ruins, a signal beacon pulsed from the heart of the capital, sending coordinates to Earth as per the old human summoning protocol. 3 days later, they arrived. Wasn't a fleet that darkened the sky. It wasn't a massive weapon or a swarm of their own. Instead, it was one single black ship. Sleek and quiet, it slipped past the remains of orbital defenses without triggering alarms or engaging any hostiles. It docked at the remains of Landing Zone 9, which had been bombed out weeks earlier. The Union soldiers guarding the perimeter aimed their weapons, unsure if they were welcoming allies or death. The ramp lowered and 6 figures emerged. All were human, but none wore uniforms. None looked like soldiers. They were dressed in a mixture of armor and technology, cobbled together with strange symbols and personal touches. One had a metal arm covered in etched runes. Another wore a coat made from something that shimmered like a living shadow. One woman walked barefoot across the scorched landing pad with a sword across her back and a grin that didn't match the horror around. Hera Union officer stepped forward, his voice shaking as he asked, "State your identity and mission." The lead human, a man with gray hair and glowing eyes, simply smiled and said, "We're here to win your war. Try not to get in the way." Humans were taken to the command bunker where the Union leaders had gathered. Again, this time it felt different. The room that had been filled with fear and despair now held a strange tension, like lightning about to strike you. "Sensix," said Traith in disbelief. "We called for salvation. You brought us a scout team." The gray-haired human, who introduced himself only as Merrick, looked around and replied, "You didn't call for numbers. You called for results." The other humans spread out, exploring the bunker-touching equipment, accessing data terminals. "Without asking," Merrick continued, "you're fighting this war like it's a parade. Like if you follow your rules hard enough, the enemy will respect them. The swarm doesn't play by your rules. They don't play at all. They consume. You tried to outthink them. We'll out-crazy them, Virex. Tried to stay calm. You must understand this is not a game. This is the survival of 12 entire civilizations. We do not have the luxury of chaos." Merrick laughed softly. "That's why you're losing. You think order will save you. Order only works if the enemy fears punishment. The swarm does not fear, they only feed. But even beasts know pain. And we are very good at giving it to them." The other humans began unpacking strange devices. No one recognized them. One looked like a metal tree that grew upside down. Another buzzed softly and leaked a vapor that made the lights flicker when it touched them. One device projected a map of Helios Prime, but it didn't match the current layout. Instead, it showed shifting terrain, growing forests, and rivers where cities once stood. Merrick looked at the projection and said, "Phase 1 begins now." "We're changing the battlefield." General Trath stepped forward and demanded. "What does that mean?" "It means," said Merrick, "that Helios Prime is about to become something the swarm has never seen, something it cannot adapt to. We are going to give this planet teeth, claws, and fire." The Union leaders looked at each other, uncertain. This wasn't how they fought wars, but this was not a war they were winning, either. In the following hours, the humans spread across the capital. They ignored strategic points and defense lines. Instead, they planted strange beacons on rooftops, buried generators underground, and whispered to the wind. The air began to change. The temperature dropped slightly, and storms began to form in strange patterns. The ground shifted subtly underfoot, like the planet itself was stirring. The swarm kept advancing, unaware of the trap being prepared for them. Far above in the void, more ships were seen moving toward Helios Prime. Not Union ships, not human ships. These were swarm carriers, black and endless. The final wave was coming. But now Helios Prime was no longer just a battlefield. It was about to become something else entirely. A weapon built by the minds of Earth. A place where the laws of logic were twisted, where the terrain itself would rebel against the invaders, and at the center of it all, The humans stood smiling, waiting not for orders, but for the enemy to make the mistake of stepping forward. The galaxy had asked for help, humanity had answered, and now the war was about to change forever. Arrival. The unwanted, the sky above Helios Prime had changed. The clouds moved in unnatural spirals, the color of bruised metal and fire. The air held a strange charge that made fur stand on end and feathers shiver, even among species that had never before sensed electricity from the sky. Union soldiers looked up nervously as shadows drifted across the sun, not from ships, but from strange shapes floating in the upper atmosphere, silent and unmoving, like watchers waiting for something to begin. The humans moved through the ruins without fear. They wore no insignia, carried no rank, and obeyed no chain of command that any Union officer could recognize. They communicated in gestures and short commands spoken in a language that didn't match Earth's official tongues but seemed cobbled together from code phrases. Memories and private jokes, no translator could follow it yet. They understood each other perfectly, and somehow the planet seemed to understand them. One of the humans, a tall man called Cade, knelt in the middle of a collapsed street where swarm corpses still twitched with residual energy. He reached into the ground, not with tools, but with bare hands, closing his eyes and muttering softly around him. The asphalt cracked, then shifted, as if answering a call beneath the surface roots. And glowing burst through the ground, curling around the bodies and pulling them into the earth, as if the planet had opened its mouth and started to feed. Nearby, another human named Shira was working with the strange metal tree that had been planted 2 days earlier. Its roots now stretched across an entire district, drawing energy from broken power lines, abandoned vehicles, even the batteries of dead drones. As she whispered into its core, the tree pulsed with light, and the skies above darkened further. Thunder rumbled not from clouds but from deep within the tree itself, as if it were syncing with the heartbeat of something far larger than it appeared. Union commanders watched all this from a distance. They'd been ordered not to interfere, but fear was growing among the ranks. These humans did not behave like allies. They made no reports held, no briefings offered, no assurances. Their actions were shrouded in mystery, and their methods ignored every principle of Union warfare. There was no coordination with local defense, no strategy that made sense to military logic, and yet the swarm had stopped advancing. For the first time since the invasion began, there were no new breaches in the defense perimeter. For the first time, scout units returned with their full teams intact, reporting strange occurrences along the front. Swarm creatures wandering aimlessly, losing cohesion, turning on each other, or collapsing in place as if infected by confusion. General Trath paced within the command chamber, fists clenched, armor scratched from battle. He turned to Chancellor Variks and said, "This is madness. We are not working with warriors. We are hosting sorcerers. They are doing something to the planet, and we don't even understand what it." Ivrex looked older than usual, his face lined with worry, but his voice remained steady. "You wanted results, General? The humans bring results, not comfort. We must endure their methods if it means our survival. But what are their methods?" Trath shouted, "They are rewriting our world. This is not defense. It is something else, something darker." At that moment, a message came through a direct visual feed from Sector 9. The screen flickered, then stabilized, showing a wide canyon where the swarm had been gathering their largest forward base, but it was no longer a base. It had become a pit, a black hole in the ground, ringed by moving stone and shifting light. Storm circled it from above, glowing red and silver and screaming without sound inside. The pit's swarm bodies tumbled endlessly, falling without ever hitting bottom. Their signals vanished from Union scanners, as if the very space had been erased from reality. No energy, no mass, no heat remained. One of the humans appeared on screen, Merrick, the gray-haired one, standing calmly at the edge of the void. His voice came through the feed, steady and cold. "Phase 1 complete. You may want to evacuate that sector before Phase 2 begins." Feed cut off for a moment. No one spoke. Then the Elon emissary finally said in a trembling voice, "That is not technology. That is not war. That is rewriting nature itself." And yet it worked. The swarm began to retreat from several key areas, not in panic but in hesitation, as if sensing something wrong with the planet itself. They advanced on instinct, on hunger, but now their Instincts screamed danger. The terrain was no longer familiar. The air was filled with signals they couldn't parse, noise that disrupted their hive mind patterns earthborn, frequencies laced with something more than static in the shadows of ruined buildings. Union soldiers found strange devices left behind by the humans, small boxes humming with low vibrations. When open, they projected illusions not of light but of memory scenes from Earth's brutal wars, images of loss, terror, defiance, and rage broadcast directly into the minds of those who saw them. It wasn't designed for the Union, it was designed for the swarm, and it worked. Swarm units broke apart, some began to turn on each other, others froze completely as if trapped inside thoughts that didn't belong to them. Thoughts they had never evolved to feel. The battlefield was no longer controlled by numbers or firepower. It was controlled by fear, confusion, and madness, and the humans were the architects of it. Allah's night fell across Helios Prime. The humans regrouped near the heart of the capital, standing atop what remained of the central plaza, where once the Union had held festivals and speeches. Now it was a staging ground for Phase 2. They spoke softly among themselves, checked the readings from their strange devices, and waited for the final trigger. They had not come to fight the war like the Union expected. They had come to change the very rules of the war itself. And now the swarm was beginning to understand that the real enemy was not the armies or the weapons or the fleets, it was the humans themselves. They had just arrived. Burn the sky. The fourth night after the humans arrived was unlike any that came before. Helios Prime's skies were no longer the blue and violet shimmer that once bathed the capital in beauty. Instead, they roared with fire as clouds churned in unnatural patterns, spitting bolts of red lightning that never touched the ground. The stars above were gone, replaced by a pulsating glow that felt alive and angry. The air smelled like charged metal and soil and something older, something that had not stirred in millennia, from the highest surviving spire of the command center. Chancellor Vorax watched the horizon split open. Flames crawled along the edge of the city, not from swarm bombardment, but from the sky itself. As if the heavens had turned against the land, a great ring of light hovered above the ruins, casting down beams of concentrated solar fire. The orbital mirrors had activated, but not in the way Union engineers had designed them. Merrick and the other humans had rewritten the orbital systems, repurposed the planetary climate control satellites into weapons of atmospheric fury by refracting solar flares through enhanced lenses. They had turned the planet's own sun into a weapon, not just against the swarm, but against the land itself. The forests ignited, the oceans boiled near the coasts, and great craters formed where precision strikes reshaped the battlefield. General Trath stood beside Vurix, his face pale beneath his dark armor. "This is annihilation," he said quietly. "This is not war. This is extermination. We have sacrificed entire could not deny it. Cities once filled with civilians had been marked as zones of unavoidable loss. The humans had not asked for permission. They had only warned us to evacuate. Then they began to burn down. Below, the streets of the capital had become something else. Underground caverns expanded, unnatural tunnels formed by seismic pulses. Triggered by human devices, machines burrowed deep into the crust, releasing pressure, reshaping terrain, redirecting magma vents into strategic patterns. This was no longer a planet. It had become a forge in the heart of the capital. Beneath what remained of the plaza, the humans had gathered around a structure never before seen by Union technology. It stood 15 meters tall, made of bone-black metal, and pulsating energy that shimmered with human rage. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense, but a convergence point for Phase Tashira. Stood before it, arms outstretched, her eyes glowing white as tendrils of energy flowed through her. Voice echoed without sound, resonating through the ground and the air. She spoke in the old tongue, not of Earth, but of something older, something born from myth and pan above. The storm focused into a spiral, and then it began to rain fire across. The front line's swarm forces began to retreat, but their escape was cut off by rising walls of glass formed from superheated sand. Whole battalions were trapped in shifting pits that filled with molten metal or swallowed them into artificial sinkholes. Their collective mind began to splinter, exposed to environmental variables they could not process. They tried to regroup, only to find that their formations collapsed under constant environmental distortion. Union commanders who witnessed the chaos From aerial observation, decks could not believe their eyes. The battlefield now moved like a living creature, shifting its body to trap, corner, and destroy with surgical cruelty. But this cruelty was not mechanical, it was human back in the command. Chamber panic spread among the surviving council members. One of them, an old Felari ambassador, turned to Varix and asked with genuine horror in his voice, "Are we allies or prisoners? We summoned salvation or execution?" Varix had no answer. He could only watch as the swarm died by the thousands and the planet wept beneath its own transformation. The humans, however, did not pause. They moved through the fire unharmed, guided by technology and instinct that defied logic. Cade led a team into a crater formed by the mirror blasts, and from its center they pulled a sealed capsule nearly ancient in design, covered in rust and warning signs written in Earth languages that no longer existed. Inside was the secret weapon they had never told the Union about, not a bomb, not a virus, but something far worse. Something that thought they called it the Black Seed. It was not alive, not truly, but it was aware. It had been banned by every Earth nation, even during their darkest wars, because it did not just destroy enemies, it learned from them and then rewrote them. It bonded to hosts, improved them, twisted them, made them more efficient, more brutal, more human. In the worst ways, Shira looked at the seed and whispered to Merrick, "It's time." He nodded and activated the Black Protocol Union. Sensors immediately went dark across 3 districts. A pulse of energy spread outward, knocking out cameras, drones, and even psychic scanners. Then silence followed by screams, and then nothing when contact was re-established. They saw what remained. A forest of twisted metal and bone had grown in minutes, and inside it moved shapes fast, brutal, not fully swarm, not fully human. The swarm had a mind, the humans had imagination. The Black Seed fused both into something new. The swarm began to retreat in full. Some units self-destructed, others fled toward space in blind terror. Their hive mind sent only one signal, now danger, Earth origin. Unknown, avoid at all costs. The skies above Helios, Prime, the mirrors began to realign as if satisfied. Their fire dimmed and the storm began to clear. Merrick walked back to the plaza, now blackened and silent, and looked at the crater where the last swarm beacon had melted. "Phase 2 is complete," he said without emotion. "Phase 3 begins when they come back, and they will come back, but next time we will be ready." The humans had not just defended a world, they had remade it in their image, and the galaxy would never forget what they saw when Earth answered the call. Their Black Protocol, the cities were silent again, but not because peace had returned. The silence now was thick, heavy, unnatural. Helios Prime no longer sounded like a living world. It echoed with a strange stillness, the kind that settles over a place that has witnessed something ancient and unforgivable. The swarm was gone from the capital, driven back in fear or confusion, but the planet itself had become something new, something terrifying deep beneath the ruins, in what was once the heart of Helios. Prime, the Black Seed, had been activated, and its influence was spreading faster than the Union could measure. The humans did not try to explain what it was. They gave no briefings, no warnings, no control protocols. They simply said it was necessary. Chancellor Varix watched the latest reports come in with cold dread. Union scout drones had vanished in multiple sectors, entirely swallowed by a shifting growth of black metallic vines that pulsed like veins, carrying something that wasn't blood but moved. Like it across 3 sectors, soldiers had reported shapes moving in the smoke, tall, fast, armored, in ways that did not match human design or swarm biology. Bodies retrieved from the zone bore marks of both claw and machine, and none had faces left. General Trath stormed into the command chamber, his armor scorched and dented, his voice shaking with rage. "You unleashed something you do not understand," he shouted at Varix. "This is not victory, this is genocide. We have replaced one enemy with another." Varix raised his hand to silence him, but even he could no longer find the strength to deny the truth. Around the room, Union leaders from surviving races looked at one another with fear more intense than they had shown even during the swarm invasion. Because the swarm had been a known terror, a hive with patterns and behavior. But this was new. This was human. Outside the command bunker, the ground had changed entirely. The once shattered cityscape had grown towers of unknown material, smooth and black like obsidian, but warm to the touch, and humming with faint voices at night. They whispered in languages no Union translator could decipher. Union soldiers refused to patrol those areas anymore. Some had gone mad after spending too long near the towers, others simply vanished. Merrick and his team remained in the center of it all, standing at the edge of the black zone, calm and unbothered. Cade had grown quieter than before, his eyes now glowing even in daylight. His movements had become sharp, almost mechanical. Shira spoke less and less, and when she did, it was in half-formed sentences, like she was talking to something only she could hear. The others followed them without question. When questioned by Union command, Merrick answered with a tone that felt less like an explanation and more like a warning. "The swarm evolves," he said. "We evolved faster. We took their code, their biology, their neural mesh, and rewrote it to serve survival, not instinct. The Black Protocol is not a weapon. It is an answer to what asked Varex to extinction," replied Merrick. "To failure, to helplessness, the Black Protocol was more than a weapon. It was a rewriting of the battlefield, a living algorithm of war that infected space, time, and biology. Every enemy it encountered, it learned from every ally it touched, it upgraded whether they consented or not. One outer district, an entire regiment of Brath warriors had been caught in a black zone surge. They were recovered 3 hours later. Their bodies had changed. They were taller, stronger, their armor fused into their flesh, their minds linked to something unseen. They spoke in unison for exactly 30 seconds before collapsing into unconsciousness. When they woke, they remembered nothing, but their eyes did not match their original species. General Trath ordered the humans detained. It was the first direct act of aggression the Union attempted since the humans arrived. It lasted 11 minutes and ended with an entire Union squad vanishing from the command chamber, not killed, not injured, just gone. Their weapons were found fused into the floor, their armor melted into the walls. Merrick returned to the chamber alone and said calmly, "We will not be detained again." The Union realized then that they had not called for help from another army. They had called something older, something buried inside human evolution, something Earth itself had hidden for centuries. The swarm had feared humanity for a reason, and that reason now walked among the ruins of Helios Prime without opposition. And then came the truth. From deep space came a new signal, not from the swarm, but from one of the fringe galaxy's long-thought uninhabitable surveillance drones. Picked up something horrifying. A swarm world had been burned completely to ash, not by bombardment, but by retreating swarm units themselves. Entire hives had self-destructed across multiple planets, one after another. Their message was simpler: Thorgen contamination detected. Protocol 0 engaged, avoid all human contact, all surviving swarm vessels are to abandon sectors containing human presence indefinitely. Swarm was not being defeated. They were fleeing not from weapons, not from numbers, not from superior tactics. They were fleeing from what humanity had become. Varex sat alone after the revelation. The war technically over, but the future now uncertain. He understood then what it meant to win to. Completely, the swarm would not return, but the humans would never leave on. Helios Prime was no longer part of the Galactic Union. It was part of something else. Something, it called itself human, but was no longer the humanity. Anyone remembered the Black Protocol was active, and there was no turning it off. The reckoning. Helios Prime stood in the center of a galaxy that no longer recognized it. Once the crown jewel of the Galactic Union, it now radiated a presence that twisted scanners, disrupted long-range communication, and sent ripples through space as if the planet itself had become sentient. The swarm had not returned. No new waves of their ships appeared on long-range sensors. No attacks, no contact, nothing. They had simply vanished, leaving behind ruins and questions and a fear deeper than the Union wanted to admit. The Black Protocol had completed its cycle. The humans moved through the new world they had forged without effort. Each of them had changed, not in ways visible to the eye, but in energy and presence and thought. Merrick no longer gave commands. He simply appeared where he was needed, as if he had stopped moving through space and had begun moving through will. Cade no longer spoke at all, but machines reacted to his gaze, opening doors, rerouting power, revealing secrets that even Union engineers had not understood. Shira was the most changed. She now walked barefoot across molten stone without burning, and birds Strange ones not native to Helios Prime followed her movements like soldiers awaiting orders. The Union tried to resume control of the planet, but nothing responded to them. Drones lost connection the moment they entered the black zones. Sensor readings returned gibberish. Ships trying to land without clearance from the humans were redirected without force, simply pushed away by gravity fluctuations that defied physics. General Trath made one last effort to reclaim command, leading a mixed force of Union elite into one of the altered sectors. He disappeared for 17 hours and returned alone with no memory of what had happened. His hair had turned white, and his hands shook even while holding his weapon. He did not speak against Chancellor Varix, finally requested a private meeting with Merrick, not to threaten or beg, but to understand. They sat in the ruins of the Union Hall, beneath the shattered banners of 1,000 worlds, and Varix asked the only question that mattered: what have we created, Ka? New alliance to adapt to this new version of humanity and learn from it, but no one could forget what had happened. When the humans were called, one representative from the Elan said what everyone feared most: they are not an enemy now, but one day they might be in. We will not be ready. No vote was passed, no treaty was signed. The Union simply watched and waited, hoping that the humans would remain content with Helios Prime, and that nothing would cause them to move beyond it into the surface of the planet. Shira stood alone on a cliff, watching stars shift above her. A swarm of strange light birds circled her in silence, and the wind moved in time with her breath. Cade stood nearby watching her, not with concern, but with understanding. Has started, she said, without turning. Cade nodded. Yes, they will try to stop it. Shira smiled gently. They are welcome to try beneath them. The world pulsed with light. The end of the war had come, but the true beginning was only now unfolding. The galaxy had called the humans in desperation, and the humans had answered what? Return from Earth was not salvation. Beyond the last war, the stars no longer told stories of ancient heroes or whispered the names of lost empires. They now echoed a single unspoken truth: that the universe had crossed a line, and on the other side stood something it could not fully understand or contain. The humans had arrived as a last resort, summoned not for diplomacy or unity, but for war. They delivered it with terrifying precision, and then remained not as conquerors, but as something else. Something new. Helios Prime had become more than a battleground. It was now a living archive of what humanity had become, a monument built, not with stone or metal, but with willpower, sacrifice, and transformation. The cities they rebuilt shimmered with impossible geometry, each building a paradox of material and purpose. Trees grew with metal bark and leaves that hummed in harmony with the wind, and beneath the surface, strange machines moved with purpose too deep for any outsider to interpret. A noon probes had long stopped entering the atmosphere. The last one that tried never sent data back, but was returned to its point of origin, reassembled, polished, and engraved with a single phrase in galactic standard language: thank you for your concern. We are thriving. Those within the Union who had witnessed the original call the day the humans answered knew that the galaxy had shifted permanently. That moment had divided history into before and after. Before the swarm, humanity had been a cautionary tale, an exiled race to coexist. After the swarm, they had become the boundary between survival and extinction. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, rumors began to spread of human ships appearing in dead systems, not as invaders, but as watchers. Ancient ruins, long thought abandoned, flickered back to life when their boots touched the ground. Old technologies began functioning again, as if they recognized the ones who had returned. Some whispered that humanity had unlocked something buried at the root of all intelligent life. Others believed they had become something close to the architects of evolution itself within. Helios Prime. Shira stood at the summit of a mountain that did not exist a year ago, carved by seismic pulses triggered not by tectonics but by thought. She looked into the endless sky, and for the first time since the war, she felt something that was not war or duty or memory. She felt peace. Cade approached silently behind her, no longer wearing the armor of the old Earth armies. Instead, his body carried marks etched with light symbols that moved like rivers along his arms, shifting and glowing with his thoughts. They are watching again, he said. Quietly, Shira nodded. They always will. They fear what they do not understand. Do we understand it? She asked, not fully, but we are not finished becoming. She turned to him, her eyes carrying starlight and memory will. We leave this place one day. She asked not yet, he said softly. This is still the beginning, and if they call us again, then we will answer not. With anger not, with vengeance, but with the truth of what we are, not monsters, not saviors, simply human. Above them, the sky opened, and for the first time in centuries it rained on Helios Prime. Each drop glowed faintly with energy drawn from the very soul of the world below, a cleansing not of fire but of renewal somewhere. Far beyond that sky the Union listened, still afraid, still hopeful, and uncertain if what they had unleashed could ever be undone, or if it even should be. But the humans made no threats, no promises, no oaths. They built, they evolved, they remembered. The universe would remember them not for what they destroyed, but for what they became. The end.